Okay, so answering the question, there are no ethical billionaires. First, let me have a sip of coffee. So the question is, or the assertion is, that billionaires are unethical by virtue of being billionaires. Let's ignore the circular reasoning in that for a second, and let's try to steelman this. Most people would say that billionaires are unethical because they exploit people to become billionaires. And then when they are wealthy, they don't give their money away to poor people. Let's start with the second one there first. There are very few wealthy people that don't give their money away in some way to philanthropic causes. And you can argue whether what they consider important enough to give their money away on is important to you or is should be considered philanthropic. But that's a different topic for another day. For now, saying that they don't give money away to the less fortunate is just not true. They do. Now, is it as much as you want them to? Maybe not. Is it all their money? In some cases, probably. In most cases, probably not. But then the question can be turned back to you as well. Okay, well, why don't you give all your money away? And you might answer that saying, well, I have to spend most of my money just to survive and spend most of my time to get that money. So it's very difficult for me to do these sorts of things, whereas a billionaire has all this time and money that they could just help other people with. And the reality is many do. People who've built wells and houses in Africa, or Mr. Beast building houses in Central America for people who need them. And you might say, well, they can do more. Sure, they can. You could do more too. You could go volunteer at a soup kitchen instead of scrolling Instagram, or instead of listening to this silly talk. But in reality, we all also want to enjoy our life. And that's the thing you got to remember. Whether someone is wealthy or struggling, everyone's trying to find ways to maximize their enjoyment. And you can say, well, they're not helping fix the world to the level of efficiency that I would prefer. And that's fair. That's fair. They might not be. But that doesn't necessarily make them unethical any more than you're unethical for not taking every spare moment you have to help fix the world and for maximizing your own enjoyment. On top of that, you could prove the point by going and trying your best to become wealthy in an ethical way, and then taking your extra money and giving it entirely to important causes. And I have a feeling that for most of us in the world, we wouldn't do that. We would find ways to enjoy our life while also helping on the side, which is what they end up doing. Now to the first point, which is you have to exploit people to become a billionaire. So this might have popped up in your mind when I said, well, you could try becoming wealthy yourself. In an ethical way, you probably said, no, well, you can't. You have to be unethical to become wealthy. And I know many people who think this. And this really comes down to, what do you consider unethical? Because for some people, paying a person who, let's say, mops the floors in your factory a certain amount less than you pay for a mechanic who keeps critical machinery running is unethical. For some people, having a profit at all is unethical. And by that logic, well then, yeah, I mean, you can't turn a profit without being unethical. There's just no way around it. But if you actually take the idea of unethical as being things that hurt others or are wrong, there are certainly ethical ways to gain wealth, because wealth is really just a value exchange at scale. So let me give you an example. Taylor Swift, extremely wealthy. And if you look at her albums, which is what people are buying, which is a large part of what makes her wealthy, why would someone buy the same album twice? Maybe it's got a different cover, whatever, or it's a re-release. Why would they buy it again? Because to them, either supporting Taylor Swift or having the things that they love that she's created is more valuable than the cost of whatever thing it is that they're purchasing. And she has done something that has appealed to so many people. If it appealed to 10 people, she wouldn't be a billionaire. She'd have 10 great fans, but she wouldn't be a billionaire. But she appeals to millions and millions of people worldwide. And because of that, millions and millions of people spend their $10, $20, $30 on her products, which then, of course, makes her a multi-millionaire or billionaire. So is that by default unethical? you might bring up, okay, well, what about all the people who go into making those products and selling those products and marketing those products and driving her around or flying her around or whatnot? And in response, I'd say, well, if you look at their salaries, I would venture to guess that they get paid as well, if not better than the equivalent person doing the same job for someone else. Does her bus driver's got a $100,000 bonus? When was the last time the city bus driver got a $100,000 bonus? And I promise you, your city, state, and federal government has way more money than Taylor Swift does, and spends way more money than Taylor Swift does on far worse, far less ethical options. In fact, for a lot of people, the solution, in big air quotes, you can't see it because it's a voice, but the solution for billionaires is to tax them, right? They want them taxed. They want them to pay their fair share, more air quotes. And then that money would go to government, who they presuppose would use it wisely. But I think anyone who's paid attention realizes the government does not use money wisely. Not only that, if you took 100% of all the money made by all the billionaires in the United States, for example, you took all their money. They have no more money left. They're at zero. They're now on the street. You sold all their houses, you sold all their stock, you sold all their cars, you sold everything they own. Their net worth is gone. And you reallocated that to the government. That would be $4.5 trillion. Well, the budget for the United States for 1 year is closer to $6.5 trillion. So you wouldn't even fund the government for 1 year by confiscating all of their wealth. And this wouldn't be something you could do every year. Now that you sold off their stock, their houses, all this stuff, that's it. You don't get that back. You don't get to go back next year and take it again. What do you do then? So a lot of these problems that we blame billionaires for, right? Elon Musk buys Twitter. Why didn't you spend that money on poor people in Africa? A lot of these complaints that we have, we direct or are directed to point them towards billionaires, and saying things like, oh, they're automatically unethical makes it easy for us to blame them. When in reality, a lot of that falls under the domain of our own government, a thing in which we have a say. Yeah, it's a small say, it's a vote or a protest or getting involved in some organization. But we do have some say in that. And yet that same government has failed to fix roads, has failed to take care of infrastructure, has spent billions and billions or hundreds of billions of dollars bombing random people overseas, and brings in trillions of dollars a year. Why is it that we're not more concerned about what they're doing with that money and why they're not helping the poor even at home, much less around the world? And yet we're out here claiming that it's somehow evil to become a billionaire when people have voluntarily given you money. Now, that doesn't mean that there are no unethical billionaires. Of course there are unethical billionaires. But is the thing that makes them unethical the fact that they are wealthy, or that they are unethical? There are unethical homeless people. There are unethical poor people. There are unethical middle-class people. There are unethical millionaires and unethical billionaires. It's almost like being unethical is something that runs through the heart of every person, as opposed to just being confined to people who have a lot of money. And yeah, it's easy to look at the people who have a lot of money and think that they have this big vault full of gold, that if only they would share a little bit of it, everyone else would be better. But even that's just not the case. Most of these billionaires, first of all, just to be pedantic for a second, their net worth is in assets. It's in their stock. It's in their house. It's in whatever it is. And that's not easy to liquidate and to give away. Now, they could still do it, sure. But you also have to think about what the average person would do with that money. Now, I'm not saying that people shouldn't make more money. I'm not saying that people shouldn't have better wages. I absolutely agree with that. Reducing income inequality is a part of creating a stable society. And so it's an important part. But if you're concerned with the fact that when you go to work, or when people you know go to work, they're paid far less than they should be, you have to look at two things. A, the value exchange, right? You pay a certain amount because you find something more valuable than the money you're paying for it, whether that's food when you're hungry or a Taylor Swift album. Well, corporations and businesses are doing the same thing. They pay a certain amount because that's what they consider the value exchange. Let's take a janitor, for example. Janitors paid a certain amount of money because they need their floors cleaned in their building. But it's worth X amount to them. Now, you might say, look, janitors deserve way more money, and maybe they do. Maybe you're right. But if you're concerned about the wages of lower skill, lower wage workers, then what you need to be really concerned with are the efforts at a societal scale to flood more and more people into the market. Because the way that markets work, if there's a lot of something, it loses its value. If there's a little of something, all of a sudden people are willing to pay a lot more for it. If there were very few janitors, and it was really difficult to find a good janitor, all of those companies, all of those billionaires would be paying a lot more for janitors. It's the reason they pay a lot more for computer scientists or, any of these kind of really high-end jobs, because there aren't that many of them. But as long as you have millions of people coming in every year, and this is why these companies like this, millions of people coming in every year, which ironically, everyone who says billionaires are unethical supports, you drive down the cost of that labor. And that's just a market force. There's no way around that. The more you try to tinker with it and fix it, the more you ruin something somewhere else. So if you really want low-wage workers to have higher wages, what you need to be doing is trying to stop the inflow of millions and millions and millions of new low-wage workers. In the end, you'll always need them. You'll always need people to be janitors, truck drivers, flip burgers. There's no way around that. And yes, each of those people should live at, or should receive a wage that is they're able to live off of, because it's a necessary job. There is a value exchange there. But there are many forces that come into play when it comes to these things, and understanding them is the first step to actually making proper change. By the way, if you think I missed something or didn't properly respond to something, made straw man, or that I'm just an idiot and you really want to show me why, leave a comment, let me know, and I'd be happy to engage with you and we can have some sort of productive discussion.